Today we're sitting down with William Quigley, the co-founder of Wax. Thank you for sitting down with us, William.
Thank you.
Could you tell us a little bit about the Wax story and what you're working on today?
Sure. So Wax is a blockchain, and it came from a lot of experience that my partner and I had in building companies that allow people to trade virtual items. In this case, not crypto items, but literally the video game virtual items that a lot of people are familiar with. Paint up your avatar, get powered up with different types of virtual items that allow you to do more things in a game. So, in fact, my partner invented the concept of trading virtual items for fiat back in the 90s. And so we were doing that for a number of years. He ran the business with another person. I was on his board, but I learned a lot about the value of this stuff and why people need fiat on-ramps to trade, and they need a marketplace because somebody has to be the digital escrow agent and all that. And so we got involved in crypto after he sold that company, and for a number of years did many things we can talk about if you want to, tokenizing US dollar, a bunch of other cool stuff. And eventually we decided, you know what, blockchains might be able to add something to the trading of video game virtual items finally. This would have been like 2016. We had just seen the launch of Ethereum. We had earlier helped launch something called Mastercoin, which was the first attempt to put an intelligent layer on a blockchain, a smart contract. But we knew all the problems of blockchain because we worked with blockchain. So we thought, it's going to be very hard for people to use the current state of blockchains. But if proof of stake, which is a consensus mechanism, if the proof of stake consensus mechanism can evolve the way we're hoping it's evolved, in a couple of years, we'll be able to allow a lot of people to trade virtual items cheaply and very quickly. Those are the two really important things on a blockchain. And lots of reasons why video gamers would want to do that, or anybody collecting any virtual item outside of a game. Using a blockchain, of course, allows you to actually own the thing outright. And the prevailing business model in video games today is that the video game items are property of the video game. You are licensing the game, you are licensing the items, you don't own them. And yet, people will pay thousands of dollars for these items. So they're in this unsettling position, of owning them, but they can be confiscated at any given time. So our thinking was, as we started to think about how we build a blockchain to do what we wanted to do, we came up with what became Wax. And we launched the first video game virtual items on our blockchain, the beta version of the blockchain, last year in June. At the time, we were using Ethereum. And Ethereum, I was a big believer in Ethereum, invested in the crowd sale, liked it a lot, but it does a lot of things well, but it doesn't do small dollar amount, high frequency trading among a broad group of consumers. It's really not designed for that, for many reasons. It's the ecosystem isn't rich enough yet. You need to use things like MetaMask. MetaMask is like a browser that sits on top of the blockchain. And while it's much better than trying to actually work with the blockchain directly, having this little abstraction layer like MetaMask is helpful, but it's still not at the level that most consumers are expecting today. They want stuff that's a lot easier. They don't want to spend a half an hour learning how to use the thing that they're going to use to play a game, for instance. So we got a long way to go, but our thinking was if we had a purpose-built blockchain that was done with delegated proof of stake, so it could move very fast. We settle transactions in 1/2 of a second, so very fast. Now some people will say, well, Ethereum is only a minute or two. It's sometimes even longer. It's the variability is what will bug you, right? With any proof of work system. Sometimes it takes a minute, sometimes it takes 5 minutes. We were unfortunate last year where we launched a shortly after we launched our project on Ethereum, some wayward guys in China decided to launch a promotion on Ethereum at the same time. And it clogged the network. The way Ethereum works, for your audience, is if they're familiar with Uber and surge pricing, that's how Ethereum works. They got surge pricing. So the network always functions. It's just like you're going to pay a lot more if you want your stuff to go. So we went from a minute or two to settle to 17 hours. And from like 25 cents per transaction to $40. You know, it was an obvious illustration of why Ethereum was not going to work for us. So, so far so good. We just launched now our chain that uses the delegated proof of stake consensus mechanism, and we're building some tools into it to make it very easy to use a blockchain.
Could you describe further this process of identifying Ethereum shortcomings and then the decision to build your own chain?
Sure, and by the way, I've done a video, I think, or a write-up on this stuff as well, but I'll summarize. So Ethereum, again, it's not that Ethereum is bad or Ethereum is good. Everything generally is good for some things and bad for others. You know, cars are great, but they can't haul cattle. You need a truck for that. So Ethereum is, why would I feel very comfortable using Ethereum versus another blockchain other than Bitcoin? Because Ethereum is very secure. And it's secure because proof of work is well understood, and proof of work is willing to sacrifice things like speed and cost. It says, yeah, you have to bear the burden of those, but it's really secure. And there's lots of things we can imagine we would like to be really secure, right? So, yeah, we're using it. Yeah, sorry. On the other hand, what do we want a blockchain for? So when we looked at Ethereum, we said, okay, let's go through the 4 or 5 things that make it tough. One, I just said, fees are high. Fees are not only high, but they're variable. And that may not seem like a big deal, but I run consumer-based businesses. Consumers like predictable things. So if every day you go in the store to buy a can of Coke and the guy rolls out random numbers, pretty soon you're going to say, this is annoying. And I used to work at Disney, and we had a kind of a philosophy that consumers pray to the god of convenience. That everything you do has got to be convenience. Consumers will sacrifice almost everything on earth to get convenience. I mean, they will eat poisoned food, you know, i.e. McDonald's, because it's convenient. They can get it in 2 minutes. So blockchain is certainly not that. So variability in fees, fees that are too expensive for the types of things we do. A lot of the virtual items we sell are say, 10 cents to $1. Well, you don't want to spend 25 cents or 50 cents to transfer that item when the whole item only costs 50 cents or $1 or 10 cents. So microtransactions you cannot do with Ethereum as a result of that. The other issue, which I mentioned earlier, is the interface mechanisms. So today, the best of breed is called MetaMask. And that's like a browser that sits on top of the Ethereum blockchain. And for what it does, it's pretty good, but it's not anywhere near consumer mass market friendly. You know, it literally takes people a lot of time to use it. And it's also just patently unsafe because it is a Chrome browser extension. And I won't go into it here, but for many reasons, you know, the Chrome store is a den of malicious software, and Google should be charged with aiding and abetting financial crimes for even allowing the Google Chrome store to exist without any oversight. You know, I'm a pretty sophisticated guy. I did not realize until I started seeing a bunch of Google Chrome extensions of my company, Opskins, show up. Hundreds of them in the Google Chrome store. The only problem is they were done by bad guys, and if you downloaded the Opskins virtual item checker in the Google Chrome store, it would take over your computer, and when you thought you were logging into Opskins, you'd be logging into some bad guy's account. So you see the user interface part of the tool is just is weak. Those are the big three reasons why today it's not great. The other is when it comes to smart contracts, you need to develop those smart contracts in a particular language, right? When you use Ethereum, Solidity. Now it's a good tool, but it's a burden to ask millions of video game developers who are maybe not that proficient to try to design a smart contract in that language. There's a number of other things. Like I said, I did a video of this, but those are the principal ones. So once we recognize what were the shortcomings, then it wasn't too hard for us to say, okay, now what do we need to design to make it easy? And remember, we're running a company with millions of customers who trade virtual items every single day. We make it fast, we make the trading free, we make the trading uncomplicated. So for all the reasons I mentioned about Ethereum, it's the opposite of that. And again, you might take this as, oh, William is criticizing Ethereum, which I'm not. I still hold a lot of Ethereum. I like Ethereum for certain things, not video games.
Proof of stake is a topic that's, I think, increasingly become a big topic at conferences. What are the benefits of proof of stake? And then I'd like to maybe get into why you chose delegated proof of stake as well.
Yeah. So, I have my North Stars, and I'll explain why delegated. But first, I think kind of like climate change or something, I think the consensus has now, maybe it's not settled, but it's heavily on one side of the debate, which is proof of work is not practical for many things. This is not a debate over what is better. I don't even know how to think that way. It's like, what's better, a blue shirt or a black shirt? It depends. What is better, proof of work, proof of stake? It depends on what you want to do. So for the ultimate in security, and part of security means decentralized, and that's an overused word, sadly, and we've not yet achieved it, I don't think, but we've gotten close. I would say Bitcoin and Ethereum have gotten the closest. But for decentralized things you want to do in a decentralized manner, there's many of those you might want to do. You're worried about resiliency, you're worried about bad guys blocking you from doing stuff that you want to do, then proof of work is pretty darn good. If you want to put lots of value on a blockchain and lock it in there and feel comfortable you can keep it there for a long time no matter how much it's worth, and look at Bitcoin, right? Many people have millions of dollars locked up in it. Increasingly even Ethereum, likewise. And I know I feel more comfortable security-wise in those proof-of-work systems. But I also recognize their shortcomings. There's a number of shortcomings, some of we've covered already, but when you have to achieve consensus in a proof-of-work consensus mechanism the way done today, there is a time lag to get it done. Right? Everyone has to work on the same problem. Everyone does it. You're doing it in parallel, but one guy gets it done. He updates, the chain, and then you start getting confirmations 1, 2, 3, 4, and so on, and ultimately nearly infinite. That's good, but do we need that level of security? I would argue that the amount of security you get for proof of work for most of the things we do is excessive. Right? When you think about it, the only thing the Bitcoin blockchain subsidizes is security. It's the only thing. It doesn't subsidize marketing. It certainly doesn't subsidize lobbying. It's just security. And as a result, any economist would know you subsidize one thing and you subsidize it a lot, you'll get probably more than is needed. I would argue that's the case with proof of work and Bitcoin, and to some extent Ethereum. So let's look at proof of stake. It's simple. Proof of stake simply says the way you're going to validate a transaction is by demonstrating that you're worthy of doing that. In the case of delegated proof of stake, you limit the number of people validating the transactions to 21, 27, however many, we're 21, or Tron I think is 27. And why is that good? Because if you need fewer people to do a task, it takes a shorter amount of time to get the task done. That's really the logic. There's debate about whether you need 10 people, 20, 50, 100, 200, but as you extend the number of people, you start to have a trade-off, and the trade-off is it takes longer to get done. And so I like delegated proof of stake because you are, and remember for the audience, what are you doing? I usually call it democratic proof of stake, meaning you are electing a representative, and you elect the representative by voting for them. You vote for them with your tokens, and you elect in our chain, in EOS and others like ours, you elect a slate. You elect, for us it's like a top 30. So you pick 30 that you think are worthy to validate transactions in a way you would trust. And the top 21 that get the most votes, those are the guys who are allowed to validate transactions. And you have a bunch of what we call standbys. If something happens to one of the 21, the standby kicks in. But remembering how I began, we were really fixated on speed of the transaction being validated and the cost to do it. Now the cost to do it on Ethereum varies. It could be 10 cents, it could be 50 cents, whatever. The last 6 months for Bitcoin, I think it's ranged between 50 cents and $5, which again, for some things is great. But what if your average transaction is 50 cents or $1? I don't think those solutions work. So with delegated proof of stake, the way we're doing it, it costs nothing to send a transaction. What you do need to do if you want to use the blockchain is you have to own a certain amount of tokens, and those tokens entitle you to rent system resources from our blockchain. And when you're done and you don't want to use the blockchain anymore, you can take those tokens back and sell them. So to that extent, it's yes, you have to tie up some tokens to use the chain, but it quote, doesn't cost anything per transaction.
How's the transition to delegated or democratic proof of stake freed Wax?
Yeah, well, I will tell you, when we were using Ethereum, and then Ethereum had this catastrophe, this would have been last beginning of July, not anyone's fault other than the idiots who decided to run a giant promotion on Ethereum. And the way they did it was so insidious, it was as though it was intentionally designed to cripple Ethereum, but I don't think they did it. They just weren't thinking. What they did is they said, they were an exchange, and they're called F-Coin, appropriately named. And they said, hey, we're gonna do a contest, it's like a lottery, send us deposits on our exchange, and the more addresses on Ethereum you send from, the more lottery tickets you get. So people just sent thousands of very, very small transactions. Well, when you do that across many, many different wallets, accounts on Ethereum, you clog it. So literally we went from freaking a minute or two to settle to 17 hours. So one thing for sure, when we abandoned Ethereum and we went to delegated proof of stake, we had the ability to tell our customers, guys, sometimes networks get a little clogged, but it'll be seconds, not hours. And don't worry about paying fees like $40. You're going to pay no fees, directly. So from that perspective, it's been great. Now, there's trade-offs in life. So what are the trade-offs? When you use Bitcoin and Ethereum, if you've used and you've ever sent a transaction across those, you've probably never had somebody ask you, which blockchain miners are you voting for? In fact, you don't even care. Well, that's because that's how proof of work does. It's permissionless. Anyone can set up a mining rig, and part of what they're doing is strengthening the network by mining. Well, with delegated proof of stake, there's a burden on the part of the user. You don't have to vote, but the blockchain wouldn't function if nobody voted, because you have to vote in a small number of, they're like miners. I call them validators, block producers, whatever you want. But there's a small number of people who will decide which transactions get processed, and you have to vote for them. And if you, on our chain, if you vote, you will be compensated for doing that. You stake some tokens. Now you have a right to use the blockchain, and then you vote. And for voting, you get rewarded. It's hard to get people to vote unless they see some direct incentive. And so those are sort of some of the trade-offs, right? With mining, yeah, you don't have to worry about voting for those people, but the networks are slow. With us, the networks are fast, but you've got to do your civic duty and you have to vote for the block producers who you think are the best.
What is the future of proof of stake or delegated proof of stake, and how does Wax play a role in that, at least pushing it forward?
So I'll answer that this way. First, the shorter answer is probably the future of delegated proof of stake. It's, of course, depending how long your future is. I assume in 10 years, it'll be a lot more done than I'm going to talk about. But we've been innovating around delegated proof of stake and trying to make it more convenient. And it's inconvenient if you're, I believe, if the average guy who owns $5 worth of Wax or $5 worth of EOS is sort of required to vote, or if they vote, they get some compensation, so they feel like they should. I think it's too big of a burden for the average token holder. I would like to see two classes of token holders. We'll call it the infrastructure class and the consumer class. And the infrastructure class, they can have at it with all the Byzantine, fault-tolerant, decentralized systems and voting and staking and all that stuff. And they'll probably enjoy it. And then there would be another class that strictly want to use the blockchain to facilitate some transaction. In the same way we know, but we don't really bother with it, when we use a credit card, we understand that there's somebody who's got servers that are doing identity management and fraud management and connecting APIs to banks and all that stuff, maybe currency conversion. And then there's you and me using our credit card to buy lunch. I think we need to separate these layers, right? So to me, the future of DPoS is figuring out how we rearrange the responsibilities of the various people using the network so that those who want to can have at it with managing it and users just focus on that. So that's something we look at quite clearly. Now, the future of Wax. So when we built Wax, one of the things we also realized was, like all blockchains are a pain in the ass to work with, right? And it's funny because I came from a place where consumer convenience and ease of use was a religion. That's Disney. And somehow God put me in a place where it's the opposite of that. I don't think I'll spell the word, but it's 4 letters. So, but that's okay. So it's like, all right, blockchain is not convenient and easy to use. In particular, trying to actually directly connect to a blockchain, which is why we have these abstractions like these browsers like MetaMask and Scatter. So what we decided though was there's so many things people are going to want to do on a blockchain, particularly dApps, people who build applications that are decentralized. We thought they're going to want a lot of tools that they're used to having maybe in an app store or they're used to having on the web. And so we built another layer. We call it the Wax service layer. And the Wax service layer is a layer of microservices. The simple and obvious ones are, hey, if you're a dApp, instead of making people deal with the private key and the public key and all the worries about what happens if somebody gets that, we're going to do social logins. You use your Facebook, you use your Google account, your PayPal account, whatever it is. So social login services are wonderful for blockchain because the majority of the people, I think, are comfortable with that, particularly if you two-factor it in terms of making it a little bit more secure. We've also got things like trading services. So when you want to send somebody a Bitcoin or an Ethereum or a Wax, in the old way, you get into a wallet, a Ledger wallet or a MyEther wallet, and frankly, I think for the typical consumer, it's intimidating. And you hit some buttons, you input some long strings, and hopefully the transaction goes through. So what we did is we created another microservice that you just email people you email the guy the virtual asset, send it by phone or whatever it is. So making it so that in the same way video gamers are used to sending stuff very easily with approaches that they understand. What's your email address? Or in some your trade URL is another term we use in gaming. What's your trade URL? So we've tried to simplify the transfer of assets. We have a lot of other tools that we're putting on marketplaces. Any tool that we think is commonplace for developers or is a consumer convenience, we're building out as a microservice with an API. So instead of having to build all these connections yourself, you just connect into the API. I think the future of blockchain will be service layer based, because just like the internet, there's people who directly connect and they don't use naming conventions, right? They'll use an IP address and whatnot. Most of us want to type in stuff we understand, words, Amazon, Expedia, whatever. That's going to be much more common. And we're doing, essentially our roadmap is how it's done today. And then you've got the next phase, which is business model. So what business models are particularly apropos for blockchain? And in any technology, in any broad technology, when it's first rolled out, people use that technology to do something they're already doing with a business model they currently use. So when we first created the internet, people went and I was one of them at my incubator. We went and took mail order catalogs and we said, we'll put mail order catalogs online, right? Now that's a far cry from 5 years later where somebody invented the concept of, well, what if I had a marketplace of perishable inventory like plane tickets and hotel rooms, brand new business model, Priceline, right? When you get to that stage, where you're not only building on this new technology, but you're doing something with a business model that was never before possible, that's where magic happens. That's where massive value creation comes about. And we have not hit that yet. I am beginning to see little whispers of it though. I think in 2020 we'll start to see business models native to blockchain that cannot be done any other way but with a blockchain. And when that happens, I think you'll see a lot of naysayers going, okay, now it's time to jump in. It might even at that point truly disrupt, right? You cannot disrupt an industry by being better, faster, cheaper. You can make it difficult, but you cannot really kill it. The way you disrupt an industry is when you take their cost center and you convert it to a profit center. Literally, you turn the economics on their head. There's no way to compete. But again, that has not yet happened with blockchain.
Is there anything else we should know about Wax?
It's the place to go not just for video games, but for any digital asset. For instance, we have a dApp that runs on the Wax blockchain, and it's very cool. It takes real-world consumer products, and it creates a digital twin of those. So when people say, what should get tokenized in this world, you usually hear real estate, stocks, gold, right? That's where people's mindset goes. They never think of sneakers, or they don't think of comic books, or trading cards, or Star Wars figurines, any consumer product. Our view is that a lot of consumer products would benefit the consumer if there was a digital twin of them to enable the holder of that object with that digital twin to do stuff they couldn't do otherwise. For instance, you probably know this, there's a lot of people who have sneakers that trade on specialized marketplaces, right? And the funny thing is they never wear those sneakers. They really just use the sneaker as a store of value. So our view is, well, you know what? Why not just give them a digital representation of that sneaker and allow them to trade it and have the sneaker escrowed somewhere that can be redeemed when the holder of that token representing that sneaker wants it. When we launched this, when it was launched on the Wax blockchain, the first sneaker we put on traded 200 times in 24 hours. Now think about that. To trade that on eBay would have taken about 3 years. Get it, mail it, list it, the guy buys it, you mail it to him, he gets it, he does something with it, mails back. So think of like what, in the old days there were stock certificates, and people took the stock certificate and then they physically handed it or mailed it. Eventually we got electronic stock certificates. You can still get a stock certificate, but why would you want it? You'd prefer to have the digital version of it. So I see Wax doing a lot in this area, virtualizing or tokenizing real world items, including consumer products, to allow people to trade the digital copy.
William Quigley of Wax Exchange, thank you so much for sitting down with us today.
Thank you.